And we are live on the Frugal Crafters YouTube channel. Hopefully everything looks and sounds good. During the pre-tests, everything was looking great, and then I got a little warning on my computer, so I'm just hoping that everything's holding up. If not, let us know, and I can send my tech support person up to wiggle some wires.
Don't call me tech support, because I am not tech support.
That's Sarah over there.
Hi!
And she will be helping out in the chat. She will be relaying your questions to me. So we're going to be doing a technique called Grisaille. I will mispronounce it several times during the show and call it Grisaille, I am sure. But basically it means you're going to paint all in shades of gray, and then you will glaze over it with other colors. It's a technique typically used in oil painting, and it dates back to the Renaissance when they would use it to create very dramatic scenes, and became very popular in Baroque and Rococo painting and the highly voluptuous decorative style of painting, since it does add a lot of volume and three dimension to your work. So it's a really great technique to learn, and it's really fun to do in watercolor. And this will be a great technique if you're maybe thinking about doing oils in the future, but you don't really want to deal with oil paint yet. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to practice where you don't have to wait for layers to dry and all that stuff. This video is brought to you by jerrysartorama.com today. I have a coupon code in the video description. I have all the products that we're going to use linked up, and we'll talk about substitutions as we go along in case you want to try this, but you don't have exactly what I want, but you're not sure you want to invest in what I'm using, you know, just to try it once or twice. You will find the pattern and the reference photo and a picture of the grayscale I did on my blog, and that is linked up in the video description as well. So if you're catching the replay, just click on that link. It'll take you to the correct blog post. And I think that's all. Anything I forgot?
No, I think we covered it.
Wonderful. Just keep your questions related to this project or to watercolor, so that it will be very useful for those watching in the replay, so we don't have random questions about other medias and whatnot. And we do have a lot of other moderators helping out behind the scenes too that will help you if they can. So when we're going to begin using a color called Neutral Tint, and I've got mine in a half pan dried down here. This is by Core. If you don't have this watercolor, if you don't have a black watercolor, if you are going to use another black watercolor, just test it on your paper. Like put a stroke of it, let it dry, and then try to lift it up. Like take just a regular watercolor brush, wet it, and just go over it and try to lift that color. If that color doesn't lift, if it stays put, that's fine to do your grisaille with. If it lifts up, you want something different. You don't want your underpainting to lift up. The Neutral Tint by Core on this Aqua Bee paper works really well. If I was using this on another paper, it might lift a little bit more. So do your testing before you spend a lot of time on your background. If you don't have black watercolor that won't lift, use a waterproof ink. Let's see. Like I would choose like a fountain pen India ink, because it doesn't have a shellac in it, so you're not going to get that shininess on your paper, and it won't it won't repel your paint. So that would be a great substitute. Just pour it onto put a little on a ceramic plate so you can add some water to it and mix it. And I'd probably use not your best watercolor brushes for that, just in case it dries in your brush. But that should be pretty benign since it is safe for fountain paint. So I'm just going to use a number 8 round, and I am going to get some of this neutral tint onto my palette. And oh, I left my reference photo upstairs on my desk in the office. Would you grab that for me? But I'll just look at my other painting for right now until my reference photo shows up. It's so nice that Sarah's here. So she's not going to be watching the chat for a few minutes, so we'll have to backtrack for questions. And I'm just going to start in one of the darkest areas, which is right underneath this stem. And I've got a pretty thick mix here of my neutral tint, and I'm going on dry paper. We're going to use some techniques for blending here. We're going to use our mop brushes, which is something that I don't use an awful lot, but is really handy for this. Your mop brush can be any sort of either filbert or soft, like kind of blunt round that you have. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be a specific mop brush. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's the reference photo for your enjoyment. That is on my blog as well. I'm just going to tuck it underneath here. Now, because this is not a very liftable color, I want to keep working on that wet edge. So I'm just kind of diluting it down now. I'm going to grab a little bit of water. I'm going to keep pulling it down. Now, if I get to a point where I want to soften an edge, but I don't really want to add, I don't want to add more water, I would take my mop and I'm just going to brush it. And there's light streaming in from this direction, so that's why I'm kind of brushing that down. And it will help us get some soft areas. It will help us get some mottled looks, like in the background. Now I'm going to go in just adding a little water to my brush and bring that gray over. I needed a little lighter in here because we're going to have some of the color reflected from our olive oil bottle. And I like to go in with a mop and soften it so I don't end up with puddles. You're not going to wet this brush the entire time you use it. It's only going to be blending. So just keep that in mind. And you're just adding water to your neutral tint to get a slightly lighter shade. And you can glaze over with more neutral tint if you need to adjust your background and make anything brighter. I'm going to go up to these leaves here with this really watery gray. So if you're confused on what color to put where, if you go to my blog, you're going to see I took a photo of my painting when it was just at the grayscale, so you can see that and you can use that as a guide. It might be a little easier to follow than the photo. And now I'm going to go in with that darker color, and I like to mix it up, excuse me, when I add some more, because the pigments will separate a little bit. Pardon me. I'm not exactly sure the pigment composition of this. I didn't really look at it. I just kind of grabbed it and decided that's what I was going to use. So maybe if somebody wants to look that up, they can. But there's definitely, I think, a multi-pigment color there, because I see some blue and I see some brown pigments in there. So I'm just throwing that in where it's a little bit darker, and then I'm tapping it out. This also helps you not get puddles. And I think it's a little easier to go in with those darks first because it's a little less intimidating. If you're having a hard time getting your color dark enough, use a stiffer brush. When you're doing the background, you don't have to keep it really, you don't have to use a soft brush for the background. That's more for the glazing. And I'm just going to turn this so I can easily maneuver in here.
Ian Jackson, would you use Payne's Gray as a neutral tint or some sepia?
Test it for light fastness. Sepia is going to give you a warmer underpainting, and Payne's Gray is going to give you a cooler underpainting. So so I guess it would depend on what I was painting. Probably between the two for this, I would go with sepia, just because this is a lot of warm colors on it anyway. So by keeping this is a staining color. So by keeping this edge wet. So I keep working, I keep spreading it out from one edge. I'm not starting in the middle and going in all directions. That's going to keep me from getting hard lines, and also using the mop is going to keep me from getting hard lines. So I'm going to be getting lighter as I come up towards the top here. Add a little bit of water. And if I see a puddle, I'm going to go in with that mop and mop it up, spread it out, spread out that water. Now I don't mind if there's some mottling here, because it is kind of like a Venetian plaster in the background according to the photo. So that's fine. I like a little mottling. I just don't want cauliflowers in my background.
Carolyn Neal, she mentioned using India ink. If you don't have neutral tint, would acrylic ink work instead?
The only thing that I would be worried about with acrylic ink is that you might have some sort of barrier, like it might seal your paper on you so that the watercolor won't stick. So that would be my only concern. If you're thinning it more than 30%, you should be underbinding it a little bit, and that might actually help you in this situation. But the reason I suggested no shellac India ink, like for a fountain pen India ink, is because it is it's not going to be shiny, and it's not going to mess up the paper surface. All right, I'm just going to try to fade that out a little bit, because I need to add a little bit of like a kind of a light source that I didn't sketch on. So I just put some really light wet ink, and I'm just mopping it out so that I'll have a soft edge that I'll be able to fade into. Remember, don't clean that brush. You're going to be so tempted to want to clean that brush as you're going, but try to resist. So what I'm going to do here, if you look at the reference photo, we've got this really dark band and this light area. It's like on a windowsill here. So I'm going to cut that in with a flat brush. Use something with a good edge. And I'm going to get a fairly dark paint. This is a Mimik Kolinsky. Try not to drag your hand through the wet paint if you can avoid it. And I'm just going to try to get a nice straight edge. And I'm using a pretty juicy bead of color here because I don't want it to dry on me and I want to be able to spread that out. It's very forgiving though, so don't worry if you get some hard edges. It's not going to be the end of the world. I'm going to flip it just to make sure that, because I do not have that straight, I can tell it's not straight. But sometimes I have to look at it upside down to really see how off I am.
Jessica Wagatsuma, what's the best way to flatten a wrinkled watercolor?
What I tend to do is go with a, like I'll spray the back, just mist it with a little bit of water, and then I will just put it under, like a big heavy book to dry. So I'm only misting the back side, not the part that I painted, and then just set it under a book, and that usually will do the trick. I have ironed them in the past, as long as you don't have any mixed media, like if you don't have, color pencil on it or something like that, you can often kind of iron it. I would do a dry iron. You could mist the back of the paper and then just do a dry iron on it. I just want to make sure there's no lines, so I'm just dabbing in a little bit of color randomly and then I'm mopping. Go back to my round brush. If I'm going to keep using the same colors, I'll just keep them in my tray, and I won't rinse it out because I'm going to go right back to the same colors. I find it easier if I'm doing a large straight area to use a flat brush, like a wide flat brush, because it's just easier to get that straighter edge. And if I need to get in and around organic shapes, to go in with a small round brush, or not really small, number 8 is fine. Just because it's a little easier to get in there with those colors. We will need to add another layer in certain spots to get it dark enough, but that's fine. We just want to get a basis for our color down so that we can start to build our values and have a good idea of what we're looking at. Okay, and we need to get inside of the bottle here. I put a leaf in this one and I didn't in the other one, so I'm just going to work around that leaf.
Creative Planet Janet, I know Lindsay doesn't usually like using white watercolor paint, but couldn't it help in making different shades of gray, like in this technique? You're
going to get mud if you use white. You definitely want to use water because your paper's white, so you'll have plenty of white just with the paper. Because when that white is very liftable, so if I put white with this instead of water, I would end up, not when I'm doing this, if I was just going to keep it gray, that would be fine, but when I go in to add the other colors, it would mix with the white and I would end up with a really milky, kind of hazy, and I wouldn't have those nice, clean, robust colors. I didn't even add any white or anything to the highlights or any colored pencil or anything, as much as I was thinking I might want to, but I didn't last night. I decided I would wait, and then in the morning when I looked at it, I decided I didn't need any. It was fine. And I've got a little space here. So that's the main reason why we don't use white in watercolor, because it makes it opaque and it keeps you from getting that luminous look. Because what happens is your light shines through the paint, bounces off the paper, and then back to your eyes, and that's why watercolor has that luminous look to it. Otherwise, it will look more like a gouache or an acrylic painting if you were to skip that, if you were to add the white. Well, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the effect I was going for here. Great questions. Okay. I'm going to work on the bottle a bit. We will be coming back and adding more into the background. But we are going to work on the bottle. I'm going to set that and move my palette over a little bit so you can see my reference photo here. And I'm just going to start building shadow, but you're going to want to be careful to look at your highlights. Like we've got this really strong highlight here in the neck. It's not a really sharp highlight, but it is pretty bright. We've got these sharp ones on the top of the bottle. We've got a little bit of highlight there. We've got a little there. So you've got to make sure we keep the lightness of the paper, or it's not going to look like glass. So again, we're going to have our neutral tint on our palette. I'm going to look for my darkest area and go in first. And I think one of my darkest areas is up here on the cork. And I want to have texture too, so I'm just going to kind of dab in. And I'm going to blot my brush off because I have way too much paint on there. If you have the darkness right, but there's just your paint is too liquid, just blot it. And you can keep the darkness, but it will take some of the liquid off. Same thing if you want it lighter, but it's too wet. Just get it the lightness you want and then blot it, and you'll still have that shade on your brush. It will just be lighter.
Grace CRH, are the Van Gogh watercolors good for glazing techniques?
Yeah, they're fine. They're a really great student grade paint. They're a little bit more than the other student grade brands, but they are really good quality. They have a lot of single pigment colors too, which I like. I don't like their burnt sienna. They have a weird burnt sienna mix. I think they have I think it's like PR 101 and black, which is just a weird brown. It's not a reliable mixer. And I'm just gonna be really careful not to lay my hand on something that I've already painted. So I've got dry paper towel here. I'm just gonna lay it down while I get in here. Little shadow on the inside of the spout. I'm really going to try to get this done in one live stream. If I can, if we get to like an hour and I can see that I'm nowhere near getting to color, then what I'll do is we will wrap it up on a weekend live stream. But in any event, the replays will be available. So if we do have to break it up, because I already have next Friday's planned, then it will be this weekend, and the replay will be there for anybody who can't make it live. Now when I go in here to do the surface of the olive oil at let's call it a water line, that's what we'd call it if it was like a vase. I just want to make sure I don't go into the highlight area on that side of the neck. So when you're doing this at home, if you're using this or you're doing it on your own with a different type of reference, just keep looking back and forth between the two as you're going. Your eyes should be looking at your reference as much as you're painting, so that you don't go astray. So you actually paint what's really there. Now I want to have sharp edges, so I wouldn't go right in here when I'm waiting for that to dry. I'd let that dry first, and then I would go into this area next to it. You want to make sure you're always working. If you want crisp lines, you're working on dry paper and you're not butting up against something that is wet. I want a sliver of highlight on the edge of that jar. And I have this paper towel here so I can rest my wrist on my painting because my hands are too shaky to like hover my arm like that. So if you're shaking, just put something down you can rest your hand on. It will really help, especially for these really kind of thinner lines that we have here.
Ian Jackson, use can be easily tricked by tonal values, so would you use a tonal value swatch card?
If that helps you, yeah. Or another thing would be that reference photos on my blog for you to grab. You could print it out in grayscale, and that would help too. If you feel like you're not seeing the right values. And I do go over that a lot in my class, Learn to Draw with Lindsay. So if you're enrolled with that, go over the tonal landscape and the pairs lesson, and you're going to get a lot of value guidance there. And if you're not enrolled and you want to be, there's a link on my blog post, a discount link if you want to check it out. You can always go darker with this, so if you're not sure on a value, just keep it lighter, and you can always glaze over it with a darker value of the neutral tint before we even do the glazing part. So another thing I recommend is moving as you're working. If you're getting in a situation like when I'm going to the edge of a vase, I want that line, I want my things to be shiny looking, so it's just easier if I can be pointing my brush towards the outside of something like this. And then if I have a hazy edge, I could just mop it down. It's real subtle, but I think it's good to get used to using that mop brush. And I just keep turning it as I go so that I am always comfortable where I'm working. Get a little shadow or reflection there, refraction, where the shoulder of the olive bottle is. If you end up with a little puddle, just blot your brush and just soak it up. I wouldn't go in there with a mop for a tiny little thing like that because I'd end up smudging it. Just trust your eyes. When you see a shadow, throw it in. I need a little bit lighter shape here, so I just added a little bit of water to my brush, and I'm going to mop it. Olive oil isn't like, it's more hazy because it's not like a clear liquid, more of a hazy liquid. Actually, I can put that like that. It's a little bit better. All right, and let's work on the bottom. We've got a big shadow there, mid-tone shadow. We've got one that streaks down there. Got a couple going like that. And we've got a wider one down here. And I'm just keeping a little sliver of light on the edge. We have some shadow under the ridge of the foot of the bottle here. Got some shadow up under there. Got a shadow in the center there. And it's pretty bright. We've got a lot of brightness in there, so I don't want to overdo that. And I think I'll leave the bottle at this phase for now, and then I can readjust after I go in and get another background layer on. And for our leaves, I'm going to do, this is kind of got a little bit of a crease in it. The leaves are pretty light in value, so their shadows aren't going to be very dark.
Anna Addis, could you also use Inktense pencil or block in the gray and the core on top after it dries?
Oh, absolutely. That would be a perfect substitution. Yeah, no, I didn't think of that. That would be perfect.
Right, because the Inktense aren't great lifters, right?
Oh no, once you've added water to them, they're going to they're going to be very permanent. So yeah, that'd be perfect. All right, now we're going to do our little olives. It almost looks like two tiny little green apples or something, and some black olives, but I thought that'd be kind of weird next to olive oil. I figured they're probably all olives, and I just don't see fresh olives here in Maine, so.
No.
Not in our climate. This one back here. Actually, I think I'm going to wet the ones that are dark because they have very soft shadowing. I like this Aqua Bee paper, and I just grabbed that because I wasn't intending to actually really like this project that much, and I had so much fun doing it. So I'm like, I'm just going to do it on my practice paper because I don't really like it. I don't think I'm going to like this very much. And I really enjoyed it, and this paper was ideal for it. And the other suggestion I have would be Fabriano, because Fabriano uses a synthetic sizing that's not as sizey as like an Arches, so it would grab your pigment more. Or if you use like a I'm thinking the Fabriano Artistico soft press, or the or their cold press would be good for that, or a Reeves BFK would be really good for that, which is a cotton printmaking paper, because that's not very liftable, and it would have that nice a nice surface for this. I'm just doing wet into wet on those to give them that soft shadow. Just make sure you do leave highlights, because you're not going to be able to lift them up. And of course you could go in with a highlight color later if you wanted to, but you're going to lose some luminosity if you do that. If you blot straight away, you can lift some up, but even that, see, I still have that dark there, even lifting right after I put my color down. And one regret I had in my final painting, and I'll show you the final painting, I did not leave enough light on those, either they're green apples or whatever they are. They're not as bright as they are in the reference photo, so I did make an error there. So I want you to avoid that. So if you have nice bright apples.
Did you cut your hair?
I did.
I thought, I was like, wait a minute. Okay. Sorry, it took me a moment to notice.
Oh no, that's fine. I usually have it pinned up, but I washed it today, so. Alright, so for this one, I'm actually going to grab a clean brush. I'm just going to wet the highlight area on this guy over here, so I don't have a hard edge. And something that you're going to notice about about this technique is that our darks, like edges of like these grapes and things, are just going to disappear into the shadows. That effect is called chiaroscuro, which is an Italian term, meaning I think it just means kind of dramatic shadows that fade into blackness, and you see that a lot in like religious art from the Renaissance or that Baroque, like I was mentioning before with the Grisaille, the Baroque artwork, just because it does give you so much volume when you use those techniques. I'm just going to use some water on my brush to soften that and bring it forward into the highlight area, but I do not want to lose my highlight. I want to keep it nice and bright. It's a great way to get volume. When you get your shadows and your values right, you get your volume and your realism and your 3 dimensions. And I also like that this fruit, whatever this is a different texture than the other olives. It's a little bit shinier. You want this to really look like an egg or a sphere at this point. You want that nice shape.
Deb Smith, how did the process of improvement take place? Analysis from another, comparison with other works, etc.
I'm not understanding the question.
I think it's improvement on painting.
Anyone's painting or my painting or?
Sure, I said you were successful, but I think you could say that about she said that you were successful. How did the process of improvement take place?
Experimentation, I would say. I mean, this isn't a technique I've used before, so so I just experimented. And I mean, I know I enjoy drawing, so I knew the principles of, you know, value and everything light and dark. But usually with watercolor, you're kind of starting with your lights, and you're preserving your lights, and you're painting around certain elements, so you're not exploiting the darks as much. The darks are added on kind of an afterthought. So planning it like this was really neat. It was like giving your brain a good puzzle to work on. And I think anytime you try something new, you improve all areas. Keep your brain firing. I'm just going to blot that in the center. Try to keep the roundness of it. Still need a little bit more dark down here.
Wendy Rose, how did you choose a reference photo?
Well, every once in a while I will go into Unsplash, which is this that's probably the one I use the most. It's a royalty-free website where photographers will share their work and let anybody use it for any purposes they like, without royalties, without compensation. They generously give of their photographs. And I just scroll through, and I was actually looking for something else. I wanted to do a really detailed gouache painting of a slice of pizza, and I don't know why, I just thought that would be fun. All the textures and colors would be really fun for Sketchbook Sunday. And I came across this, and I think it was Joey Maskey, who's a moderator.
He's here.
Oh, hey, Joe. I think he had asked me about neutral tint, and I knew I had some coming in a set of paints that I had ordered because I had used up a bunch of my core watercolors. I'm going to do another layer on the background, and I knew I had some coming, so I'm like, well, I'll figure out a painting we can do a neutral tint, and then, you know, give you guys some ideas for it. And then when I saw that, I kind of like popped into my mind I should do a grisaille, and I was kind of in this planning mode for upcoming live streams, and I thought, oh, so I scheduled that live stream as I was going to do something in grisaille. And then when I saw this picture the other day, I'm like, yeah, this one will be just perfect because it's not too complex. And the coloring, just like the dramatic shadows and the coloring, I knew would be just a really good fit for this technique. So the nice thing about this, as you're layering to get the dark, it smooths things out. Everything it starts looking better. You're not going to end up with streakiness. Although when I'm applying this, I am doing a little bit of a scumbling, which is when you purposely almost scribble and let your brush make some like rough marks, and that's going to help give us that Venetian plaster effect on the background. Sometimes I'm in a very I'm in a mood where I'm feeling inspired, but I'm also in a mood where I'm feeling lazy, and I'm not exactly I don't exactly feel like painting something, but I'll be looking at stuff and everything will just be inspiring or looking really good. Kind of like when you're hungry and you go to the grocery store.
I don't do that if I can help it, because that's when the bag of potato chips lands in the cart, because I'm only going to eat a few of them. Lies.
I have to go when I'm hungry, or I'll get back home and realize I haven't gotten anything
Yeah, there's no meal. You're like, well, I got some of this and a little bit of that.
Why did I buy all this kale?
Right, yeah.
That's
I got some kale and avocados.
Yeah, that's what happens when I go when I'm not hungry. I gotta go hungry.
No, I also make sure I have a list, which helps. And so I'll eat something. I always make sure I'm not hungry when I go, and I bring my list. So usually I forget things here and there, but most of the time I get it all in one go and I'm done.
This is a useful color. Boy, I was surprised. I didn't think I was going to have a use for this color. I thought it was just going to be like it's the one color I don't use. You know, I always figure if I'm buying a set of paints to like replenish, like if I need one color, I'll buy one color. But if I know I'm getting real low on a couple colors that I like, I'll be like, okay, so what am I going to use out of the set? Okay, I'm not going to use 3 of those colors, but it's a better deal to buy the set than it is to buy each color I need individually. And neutral tint was my sunk cost color. It's like, yeah, I'm never going to use that. But the rest of it's a good enough deal. But come to find out, I'm going to do this technique again. This is a lot of fun. Get some strong darks down in this corner here. Hovering again, but I know I'm actually going to take my roll of paper towels and I'm going to lay it on my table off of my painting because my painting is still wet, and I'm just going to rest my arm on my paper towel roll and hopefully stay out of your way for viewing it anyway. I need a patch of dark in here next to the contrast of the light coming in on the window, so I'm adding the color where I need it darkest, and then I'm going to mop it out. I think I've had this paintbrush since I was a kid.
Ian Jackson, apart from doing a grayscale underpainting, do you add neutral tint paint to tone or mute a color?
You know, I personally probably wouldn't do that just because I use an opposite to mute a color. Like if I had green and it was just too acidic looking, then I would add some orange or some red to it. I would neutralize it with a complementary. So I don't know. I would see if anybody maybe in chat uses neutral tint on the regular and see what they use it for, because this is my first time using it, to be honest. I prefer to neutralize with another color in the painting that I'm working on. It's a great underpainting color though. Now I want to add a little bit of texture out here, give this kind of stony look, so I'm just dry brushing, scumbling with that, with whatever's left on my brush. I'm not sure if I'm going to put the, there's like some green in here, but it's not really clear what it is. I was going to have it be just kind of like a marbly effect on the wall, and I didn't like that, so then I did end up painting green on my other painting, but I think I'm going to leave that out, because if you're not sure what something is, it's usually a mistake to try to paint it in, because it's going to usually look a little awkward. A little shadow under these leaves here to give them a place to rest. I like that we can have texture in the background because it will cover up a lot of hard edges and awkward bits. You can feather out a lot of your color right with your brush. You don't even need to go in with a mop. Scumbling for texture there. Okay, and then we'll do a little more dark down underneath here.
So we have, let's see, we have some people say what they use it for.
Oh good, what did they say?
Let me get that. Val uses neutral tint to darken blues, browns, and greens.
In watercolor?
Yep.
I know Val works in several mediums.
Well,
so.
she didn't say watercolor. I said yes. I'm assuming she means watercolor because that's
yep,
what we're talking
right.
about.
Oh yeah, that was she would.
In liquid color, uses neutral tint to darken but not neutralize. And in liquid color also says she loves neutral tint with cool reds, makes them a delicious purpley color.
Oh, neat. Okay. And I wonder what brand she's using, because I'm not sure the pigment makeup of this one. I should have checked, and I don't have my tube. Actually, I probably have it written on my pan.
And Val did mean watercolors. So that's good. We have some people that use it, and...
Oh my gosh, I have paint slopped over the side. I can't tell what it says. PY42, which is your yellow ochre, and PR127 and PB 15. So it's got your phthalo blue, which is a staining color. Your PR122, which I thought that was like a pyrrole red. I didn't think that was particularly staining. And PY42, which isn't staining. So I'm surprised. It must be that phthalo blue that's making it stain, because I'm surprised with those colors that it stains as much as it does.
Geraldine M. Is underpainting something you can do with all paintings? What is the advantage of doing this?
It gives you a luminosity because you're working with transparent layers. So if you're doing this like with acrylics, you could do this all with black and white. let it dry, and then use transparent acrylics built up over it, so you're getting a very luminous look. If you're doing with oils, you could even do your underpainting with acrylics, and then glaze over your transparent oils. So you would take oils and you would thin them with like a linseed oil or liquid or a stand, whatever oil you like to use. I just use linseed oil because I don't do too many layers, and the light shines through all those luminous transparent layers and gives you a beautiful natural look. So the advantage would be you just get a little bit, it's almost like tinting a photograph. You get a certain amount of realism that and just volume and decorative effect that you might not get with a more direct painting method.
In liquid color says the PR 122 is Quin Magenta.
Okay, so that would be staining.
Yeah.
The quins are staining.
And she also says that she uses Daniel Smith, but has heard that the M. Grahams is amazing as well.
Oh, cool. I didn't have any grays and M. Graham. I only got the more traditional colors.
And this is why we love our moderators.
Totally. Yeah, Denise knows her stuff. She has the channel that's in liquid color. She's a fantastic nature artist, a wildlife artist. And Val has a wood burning channel, and she's a very talented
Holy moly, very
pyographer.
talented.
I guess that's what you call it, pyography?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Although she's working on a painting. I keep seeing snippets of it on Instagram.
I know.
Eclipse. It's really pretty.
Tease
yes.
What she's doing.
She said something about it almost not fitting in her SUV. Like, oh my gosh. We got really talented folks.
We do.
Oh, right. I'm going to do a little more shadow on our little olives here. I'm just going to put my shadow in the dark. I'm going to start with this one. And I'm just going to tap. I'm going to wipe my brush off. And then I'm going to spread that color up a little bit. I'm going to rinse it. And then I'm going to carry it the rest of the way. So I got to have some light. If we went super, super dark with everything, none of our colors would show up when we glazed over them. So we got to have some light enough values for colors to stick. This one has a few little dents on it, so I want to get those dents in there because I think it looks realistic. You don't want everything to look perfect or it doesn't look realistic. And this one in the back is the lightest, so we'll just go do a little bit of tapping in there. Don't forget texture when you're working on these darker values. You also want to be getting your textures down, because when we go to add the color part is really easy because you've done all the work. This is the hard stuff. When you go to add your color, you're in the home stretch. Everything that's just like tinting a photograph. All the hard work is done.
Val says that the eclipse painting is her husband Jason's.
Oh, it is? I thought she was doing that.
Yeah, he does the acrylics and oils.
Oh, okay.
Either way, very cool.
Very cool, yeah. Does her husband have a YouTube channel?
I don't know, Val. Does your husband have a YouTube channel?
She's probably like, I'm trying to be quiet here and stay in the in the background.
Well, today we're asking you some questions,
yeah.
So
put her to work.
You can't just lurk right now. We're asking questions.
All right. Well, that's drying. We're going to go ahead and put our final darks on the bottle. All right. I'm going to turn it because I don't want to drag my hands through those grapes, but I'm turning my reference as well. And I'm going to move that over a little bit so I can keep everything in frame for you. And actually, I think I'm going to do a really light wash on the cork first, so that's really watery.
Jason doesn't have one yet, but she's trying to get him started.
Oh, okay, cool. You can see just by glazing over with a super light gray, none of those dots that I put before are moving. So that's what we want to see. So you were looking at this whole picture, in relation to like our darkest dark, which would be the shadow down here under these heavy fruits, and our lightest light being these streaky highlights here. And so this is somewhere in the middle. So we have to make sure that we assign these values at this point, so that it will be realistic and easy when we go to do our final stuff. I'm gonna get this nice dark slice of shadow in here. You can also switch to a smaller brush if you're feeling a little unwieldy with the number 8 round. The benefits of a bigger brush is that it helps you build brush control the more you're used to using them, and you don't have to reload quite as often. But if you can't get the lines that you want with the size brush you're using, then go to one that's going to work for you. There's no point ruining your painting over just for the sake of trying to use a bigger brush. And I'm still ending up loading up quite frequently, so it might even not really save you that much time.
Okay, now I have a question.
Okay.
Could you do chalk or pastels over this, or would the luminosity go away?
You lose the luminosity,
okay,
so I'd only do that if you wanted like a really bright highlight, or you made a
okay.
mistake and you need to cover it, you need to fix it. I was very tempted to grab colored pencils last night for like some of the highlights on those like little apples or whatever they are, but I didn't. I'm like, no, my eyes are tired. I'm gonna give myself the night. I'm gonna look at it in the morning. Yeah. And I'm glad I didn't. I don't think it would have looked bad, but I think that I would have regretted it because I think I would have lost a lot of that luminosity I wanted. Okay, so now I want to get the darker line right underneath the olive oil. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush though, because at this point I'm not really adding a lot of paint on anything. You can touch a painting with the back of your hand to see if it's dry, if it feels cool. It is not, so I'm going to grab my paper towel roll here to balance my arm. Now I can see the sliver of that dark starts way over there. And I'm going to just grab a little bit lighter color here and wash a little bit of that down. And then we've got more of that darker color here. It wasn't quite dark enough the first time I did it. And I've got another little darker patch over here, and by switching to the smaller brush, it allows me, or it prevents me from getting, going too crazy. It prevents me from getting too much color. If I do go wrong, then I'm only going to go so wrong because it only holds so much paint.
Joe Maskey, if we feel that our outer edges are a tad too hard, example on the leaves, would you recommend a clean water glaze to soften or a bit more paint?
I would probably take a watered down gray and just go over the edge. Like if that's a little, you want that a little fuzzier, let me just go over the edge. Because it might just be too much contrast. You just want to make sure that, although, yeah, I think you will need to add some more on there because I don't think just water will soften up that color enough because it's such a non-staining color. I ended up doing that in some of my leaves on my first piece, just kind of went over and softened them like that. All right, we're going to come down here. Watch out for beads of water on the ferrule of your brush so that you don't get any surprises.
Diane Riley, will this work on any piece or do you need to choose carefully to do this technique?
I would choose something that's got a heaviness to it. I wouldn't do this on, like, I mean, you could do it on florals, but I would probably choose something that's a little bit heavy, that has some heavier textures and weighted things like heavy glass or, you know, heavy fruits or something that's got some weight to it. And it's got to have strong lighting. I think that's the big important thing, is that you've got really strong lighting. Otherwise, it's going to be real hard to find the grays and get the effect. So if you set up your own still life, take a table lamp and like put it real close to what you're trying to paint, so that you can force a nice strong light.
Ian Jackson, how much is texture important at this stage of the painting?
I think texture is really important because at this stage, because you're going to be just putting veils of color afterwards. So the texture should be done here when you're getting the foundations in. So we're getting that hard glossy texture. So if you were doing like acrylics and you were going to take white and add those hard, you know, like highlights on later, it wouldn't be as important. But and you can obviously still do that with, you know, colored pencil or gel pen or something. But I think if you get it in this stage, you're going to have a much richer looking painting. That's why we tapped, you know, to get that kind of dented texture on some of these olives. We got that scumbly texture of the kind of plaster in the background. I would say it's very important. If you know, if you're taking the time to do this technique, because it does take more time, you might as well take full advantage of getting that texture in. I wonder if anyone's painting along. I can't imagine they'd be able to chat if they're painting along.
I would say probably not.
But the replay will be available, and all the supporting materials on my blog. So I think that will hopefully make it pretty easy to follow along. Okay, I'm feeling like this is a little bit harsh in there, so I am going to take my flat and wet the interior part there, and maybe just add a little bit of shadow, or maybe just see if it's going to lift up enough of my damp paint that I won't need to. Because we don't have any harsh highlights in the bottom of the jar. It's very hazy. I wouldn't want to do it up here because we've got those really nice bright shiny highlights. And I think I'll just add a little toning in there. Super, super light. Okay, now I'm going to look at my leaves because I think they're a little bright, and I'm just going to go in and add a little toning on them. And I'm just using that flat brush because it's the easiest thing to do. I can just swipe over them with one fell swoop and darken them up.
Judy's art stuff is painting along using water-soluble graphite.
Nice.
But we have people who are planning on doing it after the live video.
I think it's probably easier if you watch it through once and then you go in and try to do it personally. Okay, now just want a little more texture on the cork with this, with the gray, and then we're going to go add our color glazes, which aren't going to take very long. So, you guys are in the home stretch now. I think it's fun to look up at my monitor periodically because then I get to see what my picture really looks like, and it's like, okay, that's not too bad. It looks like it's like it was at this stage when I was working on it on the one yesterday. So I'm just using this kind of mid-value gray and tapping on cork texture. So yeah, texture is very important. We've got the bumpy cork, we've got the smooth glass. Refractions in the glass. Okay, so I'm going to dry this to make absolutely sure that the background is dry before we go on. And you can clean up your palette if you're painting along. Oops, I need to plug my drying tool in. So if you have any questions while I am drying this, it'll only take a few seconds, but you can go ahead and ask them. How many people do we have with us now?
We have 281.
Nice.
We're caught up with questions.
Good. Oh, you know what? I'm looking at the handle and I'm noticing that I need some more streaks in there. It's too solidly bright. So I'm gonna take my small, you can kind of see here. You gotta have some streaks of gray, and then you can add in your colors when we glaze. But just working on the tip of my brush, I'm gonna throw in a few little streaks in there. You could even do something like this with like your brush pens. If you had the Pitt pens, especially if you had some grays, that would be, you could like work in your sketchbook and do the underpainting just with the shades of gray Pitt pens, which are an India ink, or even with like pro markers or something like that, except that will suck into your watercolor paper a lot. But you could do your underpainting with that and then go over it with watercolors and get a very similar effect. You could do that on mixed media paper. Would probably be a little easier because it would be pretty good at the markers and be pretty good at the watercolor. Whereas regular watercolor paper might chew up your markers a little bit more.
Ian Jackson, would Sennelier watercolors be good for the glazing overwork?
Oh, sure. Sure. Pretty much any transparent watercolor is going to be fine. Even like, even inks. You just want to make sure that what you have on the bottom isn't going to lift up into your upper layers. Okay, so the colors that I'm using, I went on and talked a little bit on my blog about these colors, but the ones that I'm choosing a red, yellow, and blue. This first yellow here, this is called Nickel Azo Yellow, and it's very strange because if you use it really thin, it has like, if I had a bunch of water, you're going to see it looks kind of lemony. It has like almost like a green gold. Well, let's move that over there. Green gold color to it. But the second I start to go thickly with it, look at that. It looks almost like a yellow ochre or a quinacridone gold. So if you use it full strength, it's warm. If you use it diluted, it's cool, which I've never seen a color like that before. So I thought that was ideal for this particular project. We're also going to use Phthalo Blue Green shade, which is, if you have a Phthalo Blue, unless it states otherwise, it's a green shade, which is our nice vibrant blue there, which you'll need to, make sure you temper it. You're not going to use it full strength. And we have alizarin crimson. And hopefully somebody upstairs will answer that phone. I thought about grabbing it and moving it. So we got a nice triad there. And I am going to start with the bottle. And I am going to start with, I'm going to take a little bit of my crimson and mix it in with my Nickel Azo Yellow just to warm it up a little bit in our diluted versions here. And I am going to start glazing over here. And I'm just using a flat brush. Just want to use something that's pretty soft. This isn't a terribly soft brush, but it's soft enough, and I know that that stuff underneath isn't really going to move. I just want to keep those brighter highlights pure. A bit more red in the middle area here.
Olaf K, do you have any tips on monochromatic watercolor paintings in general?
Just know your values. Just make sure that you are paying attention to how light and dark something is, because if you're not relying on colors, you're really relying on the values. So just, you could paint anything in any color. If you have your values right, you're going to be good to go. I'm going to make a brown here. I'm going to start off with my yellow and red, make it kind of like an orangey color, and grab a little bit of the blue. A little more red in there if it goes green, and that brown will give us our more darker tones here. We're going to glaze over the darker areas with that.
Geraldine M., have you ever done side-by-side comparison of the same painting done with underpainting versus one without the underpainting? How do they compare?
I haven't, but I would approach this very differently if I wasn't doing an underpainting. I would be doing, I would still be doing some glazing, but I would be doing a completely different technique. So, I haven't, but it would be interesting. It would be interesting to see that.
Av Sna, what are the pigments in the nickel azo yellow?
That is PY 150. And I will have a full review on core watercolors tomorrow on my channel. I filmed it a couple weeks ago, but I've just been waiting for a time to post it. And I figured after this video would probably be a good time, since people might be curious about the line of paints. And I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. And I am going to make a little bit more of that brownish color. And we're going to do the top of the olive oil there. If you wanted to, you could use a brown, like a transparent brown, like transparent brown oxide. That would be a good one to use. I apologize for the buzzing fly that we have the bulkhead open because my daughter was spray painting some furniture today, so we've got house flies that have come in.
Roseate Ray, if my colors lifted when applying another layer, do you think it is my paint or my paper?
It could be either. If you have a really heavily sized paper, it's not going to grab the pigment as much. And generally I prefer a more heavily sized paper, but for this technique I would want something less sizing.
Pokey, what brand was the flat brush she just used?
I think that was, I'm pretty sure that's Royal and Nickel Aqualon. It's just got a code number on it. It doesn't have the make. I'm pretty sure it's an Aqualon code though. Royal and Nichols Aqualon. Getting the cork area here with some of that brown. Brown is made from all three colors. To make it darker, you use less water. Something I also like about these paints that we're not really seeing in this this video because we're doing glazes is that, and we're using wet on dry a lot, but if you use this wet on wet, it likes to, it really flows well. So like that's when you have your wet paper and you put your color down, it just whooshes. It's kind of a neat effect. It's very satisfying to paint with. And you can put some texture in with your glazes, like I can dab on in this cork area to give it a little bit more texture. And we'll let that dry before I glaze on my final lighter color so that you can see the rim of the glass of the top of the bottle. If you have something too green, too red, add a little green. Too orange, add a little blue. You know, just mix your opposite into whatever you're trying to neutralize. Bring some of this color down. And if you had a color, if you had a painting that had a lot more diversity of color, you could use more colors. I'm using these because I could get all the colors I needed to with these few shades. Really hope all the housefly buzzing is not showing up. Isn't.
I don't think so. They're not near the microphone, so it should be all right.
They're just tormenting us.
Yes.
I love to paint glass, so I could spend so much time just fiddling with the glass. Alright, I'm going to move on to the leaves, and for that I'm going to mix up some green. Actually, I got a pretty good green here, mostly blue and the yellow with a smidgen of red so that it's not so acidic looking. And some of this color can go, just make sure you don't have too much on there. You can get some of that up in the vase as well, or the olive bottle. We can grab a little bit of that blue. Add quite a bit of water to it. You don't want it too strong. And you could throw some of that in here for the light coming in the window. Daylight has a blue cast to it, so you want to get that in there. And then that's going to also go in your highlight on your bottle. So any of those really bright white areas actually have a tint of blue. Let me grab a little bit more of that. And get some down here on the surface that they're sitting on. And that can also help if you felt like your leaves were too strong, like too defined. You can brush over the whole thing and let them blend a little bit. And we also have some of the color from the olive bottle, the olive oil on the table. So we're going to grab that and we're going to add that. And then we can work on the grapes. I feel like I got some kind of fuzzy edges here, so I'm going to mop those out a little bit. I'm going to use a different mop because I don't want to get any black in there. So I'm just going to mop out those edges. So I could see the edges feathering a little bit, and I don't want that. So when you do go to your color glazing, I would grab a different mop. You can use the same mop everywhere, but I wouldn't use the black one. The dirty black one for your color glazing. Oh, well, I still have that green on my palette, though. I want to grab some of that and add some of that to the handle. And I also want to add some blue, because that's kind of our light color, our color of our actual daylight. Just not too strong.
Stephen Turner Neutral tint is not neutral itself, but rather it dulls yellows without shifting the mix towards green.
Oh, neat. I didn't know that.
No, it was a question.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I can mix some with some yellow in a second and see. Could be there, because I mean there is some blue in this mix, but it's not a lot of blue, and there is yellow in the mix as well. So that would make sense.
Joe is saying it can do both.
Okay, cool.
Serve both purposes.
Yeah, neutral tint is a new beast to me, because I'm not a, like, I don't use black watercolor, so so this has been a fun learning experience that I never would have done if I hadn't had a viewer request for it. I like adding this phthalo blue because it does give us a nice fresh light. Okay. All right, so now let's move on to our fruits here. Let me go back to my round brush. Just make sure it's clean if you used it with your neutral tint. And I'm going to start off with some of the yellow pretty much on its own in the highlights, and I'm going to mix yellow and blue and get a nice fresh green. That's really all you got to do. Do the same thing to the next one. Clean your brush though, so that you're not bringing the green over into the highlight area. Let me get some fresh yellow too. And add the yellow in the highlight. It's a neat color. I hope this, I'll have to research this color a little bit, make sure it's, you know, stable. It reminds me a lot of Cerulean, but Cerulean can brown over time. But it's a very transparent yellow, and yellows generally aren't. Yellows generally have a little bit of a opacity to them. I feel like I want that a little bit, maybe a little red in that mix. Grab some of that dirtier green that I made earlier that had the red in it and add some of that on there. Okay, and let's make up a purple for our grapes. Now we're not going to get a grape purple because of the colors that we have here, but we don't want a bright purple because that's not what we're painting. So that's totally fine. So our crimson and our phthalo blue. The phthalo blue is way stronger, so you don't need very much. And I think I'll start with this guy way back here in the shadows with that dark purple color. These are going to be staining mixes. Oops, I dropped some water there.
Denise says she's going to be doing a PY 150 color spotlight within 2 weeks if you want to save yourself research time.
Oh, nice. Thanks, Denise. Denise does a series on her channel in Liquid Color where she takes colors and she does like an in-depth like kind of color breakdown on them. So if you're interested in the chemistry behind the colors, go check her out. She's got some really wonderful videos about that. And she's just nice to listen to too. If you're feeling stressed out and you just want a friendly voice to listen to.
I haven't watched any of her videos. I'm guilty.
She's very mellow. Very calming to listen to. All right, added a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow in there to give it that kind of brownish olivey color. I'm going to skip over to this one. I'm just going to start off with whatever's on my brush, and I'm going to just kind of glaze over. So I ended up with this kind of peachy brown, which is all right because these are neutral colored olives that we're getting in here. They're either black olives or they're really kind of grapes that are past their prime. I'm going to say they're olives because I don't want to think of nasty old grapes sitting on the table. And I'm just going to dab some of the that dirty purple mix into the brown mix and let it do its thing, and that's going to give me a nice texture. See a little bit of blue on the bottom because it is a little bit blacker, and the blue, when it mixes with that orangey purple color, it's going to go black on us. And I want more of a purpley color. This one in front. It really will force you to look at the shadows and the colors when you're doing an exercise like this. In the highlights, you can clean your brush and add a little bit of the phthalo blue that we've been using for our color of light coming through the windows, because with that, with a little bit of a reflective surface that these olives have, you will be reflecting some of that daylight. So it's perfectly normal to have that color in there.
Diane Murray, can you explain how to make a line or shadow go up under an edge? It always looks flat when I try to do that.
You probably just need to move your paper a little bit so that you're approaching it in a comfortable manner. If you always keep your work on an easel, or it's always flat in front of you, you're always going to be approaching it from one certain angle. If I wanted, like, I'm trying to see if there's a spot in this painting that would need it. Let's say I want to have a little shadow at the bottom of that cork. So instead of like trying to go like this, it's not going to look very unnatural. I want this to look like the shadow it's the dark press of the cork pressing up against the glass. So I'm going to turn my paper. I'm going to hold it so it's comfortable. I'm going to mix my color. So I get a nice dark brown, or I think I want a nice dark brown. So I've got all three colors here. And then I am going to paint it on there so that my brush is right up against where I want that shadow to start. So I'll start it right out that corner, I'll pull it up to get my straight line, and then I'll just pull it across to get my line that I want to be kind of under the lip of the glass, and then I'll diffuse it by tapping out with my color so I can still get that texture of the cork. So that's what I do. I just make sure I turn it so I'm comfortable wherever I am approaching it from. And it will also keep you from getting aches and pains while you're working. I hope that's what she meant. Anyway. Okay, let's see. I'm going to give this a dry because I can't really get into that olive until the ones around it are dry, and I want to do a little bit more in the vase. So I'll get this through the dryer really quick. Now, if you're doing this at home, instead of using a hairdryer or a heat tool, what I recommend you do is you take breaks. You're going to be much better off if you do this in sessions rather than trying to plow through and do it all at once. I can tell the one that I did yesterday in sessions is much better than the one I'm doing today, because I would take a break and I would come back and I would look and I would say, okay, do I really want to add more there, instead of just like forging ahead. So just letting a little time elapse can really help you. All right, we're gonna get that last little grape done. And a little bit of purple. Another exercise you could do, especially if you don't have these colors, but you have ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, is to use those two colors to make a neutral and do a painting in just those colors. And I do have a tutorial on my channel. It's a winter scene in just those two colors. I think somebody is vacuuming upstairs. Oh my goodness. Never a dull moment.
Summer vacation.
Yeah. But do a painting in those two colors. Vary it, vary your warmth and your cool, vary your light and your dark. You will learn a lot by doing that. You will improve your composition skills, and you'll probably come up with a really neat painting. It was a winter scene. I think it might have been called like Snowy Tree in the Winter or something, but it just uses those two colors, and so I think it's a really nice exercise to do to kind of learn a little bit more about value and about color balance and warm and cool and all of that stuff. I think I'm going to call this done. Any final questions before we wrap it up?
Yes, Barbara Snyder. Don't you worry about mushing up the colors in your pans by going in with a brush that has another color?
I don't worry about that too much because, and this is something that comes with practice, and yes, you should probably rinse your brush between every color and don't do what I do. However, if my brush is not really wet, it's going to pick color up rather than deposit it. So if my brush was like sopping wet and I went into a pan, it's gonna leave color. But if my brush is damp and I go into a pan, it's going to pick up color. So so I really don't end up contaminating my colors too much, but I do honestly teach my students to rinse their brush between each color. But I mean, I very rarely will get any contamination in there. And on this painting, I never had any real amount of color on my brush at any time. So no, I don't worry about that too much. But you do you.
And we're caught up.
All right, awesome. Okay, and I'll just show you, this is the one that I spent a little more time on. This was obviously an hour or so, hour and a half maybe,
yeah,
hour
we're
and
almost
15.
at an hour and a half.
So the longer you spend on it, the more depth of glaze and color you can get, but the principles are the same. So all of the supporting information for this project is on my blog, links in the video description. Check that out if you want to paint along, because it will be helpful to have all that information there. And just make sure, the only thing that you don't have to have the same things that I use, just make sure whatever you use for the underpainting does not lift up, or will not lift up easily, so that you won't end up doing all this work to make a beautiful grayscale painting and then glaze and have it all pick up and mush and get muddy on you. Do you have anything to add?
No, all caught up.
All right, wonderful. You can find the supplies I used linked below. They'll take you to our sponsor, jerrysartorama.com. They have wonderful prices. They're wonderful people, and I can't recommend them highly enough. And I thank them for their support. If you want to learn more about composition and drawing and values and learning to draw what you see and learning how to detect dark from light, please consider checking out my class, Learn to Draw with Lindsay, as we go over values extensively in that class. And if you want to learn more about it, it's a great way to do that, and you get one-on-one guidance with me in the classroom should you want it. So there, that's I guess all I have. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please share it with a friend. It helps this channel grow. And long videos on YouTube generally don't do that great, so all the help I can get is wonderful, and it really encourages me to make more. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.